experience a keen breeze today. It's going to make it feel closer to about 2 degrees when you go outside. A little bit of light rain is possible as well for southern Wales, and this may include a small amount of sleet over the mountains.
Then central areas of England will tend to stay drier, but there'll still be a large amount of cloud around, making it a rather dull second half of the weekend for many.
It's eastern coasts that are going to see the most frequent showers. The occasional one may be heavy, actually. They'll feed inland on the brisk breeze, so don't go out without an umbrella.
Hold on to it fast. The showers and cloud will also push into eastern Scotland. However, northwest Scotland will likely see the brightest skies across the UK, thanks to the development of some sunny intervals.
Western counties of Northern Ireland are also in with a chance of seeing some sunny spells today, but eastern coast affected by scattered showers from the Irish Sea.
And we'll retain a very similar setup through this afternoon and evening, with further showers in the east, and that's how your weather is looking today.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236.
And YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB+ radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even some ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
I think I've seen probably quite enough of Matt Hancock to last me a lifetime.
I'll also be getting to know you better, travelling to find out what you think about the politicians who are fighting for your vote.
They've got to get this country back on track.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. only on GB News, on TV, radio and online.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and tune-in apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Join me, Lawrence Fox, on GB News. Frank, fun, fearless and sometimes serious. Much as I love a Friday night punch-up, what I really want is a battle of ideas. I want to look at things differently. I want to hear different voices and engage with your unique experiences. Every Friday at 7 p.m. on GB News.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Dubes & Co. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Dubes & Co.
I'm Mark Dolan. Join me at 11 on GB News for Headliners, in which I'll be joined by two of the UK's top comedians discussing tomorrow's papers. If it's an important story, we'll cover it, but we'll have some fun along the way. Headliners, the late night paper review that won't send you to sleep like the others will. 7 nights a week at 11 p.m. on GB News.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
The guy went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions.
I have no time for cultural totalitarianism.
We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Good morning and welcome to Sunday with Michael Portillo. Filling your Sunday mornings with good conversation, arts and entertainment, ethical dilemmas and a sense of the ridiculous too. Coming up in the next 60 minutes, yet more turmoil in the Conservative Party. A by-election drubbing Tory MPs demanding a more effective policy on illegal immigration, and yet more of them deciding not to stand at the next election. Matt Hancock, deprived of the Conservative whip because of his jungle adventures, has published his account of the pandemic, which has been challenged. Also on the programme is the 70th anniversary of the Great London Smog that killed thousands. Does pollution still threaten lives? And Cornwall's finest, the Padstow Christmas Festival, offering the best food and drink from the region. All that after the news with Bethany Elsey.
Michael, thank you. Hello there. Good morning. It's 1 minute past 10. I'm Bethany Elsey, bringing you up to date from the GB newsroom. Border Force officers and firefighters could be replaced by military personnel during strikes over the Christmas period. It's part of contingency plans announced by the government. Around 2,000 members of the armed forces are now being trained alongside civil servants and volunteers to help limit disruption. The head of the police watchdog has been forced to resign over an historical allegation. It's now emerged Michael Lockwood, who's been the Director General of the Independent Office for Police Conduct since 2018, is facing a criminal investigation. The Home Secretary, Suella Braverman, says she asked him to quit or face immediate suspension after learning about the probe. When he announced his resignation on Friday, he said it was for personal and domestic reasons. The conflict in Ukraine is slowing down, and US intelligence officials say they expect that to continue over the winter months. Washington says Kyiv's economy is now suffering after Russia launched attacks on targeting its power grid and other critical infrastructure. The Director of National Intelligence, Avril Haines, believes there will be a successful Ukrainian counteroffensive in the new year.
We expect that, frankly, both militaries are going to be in a situation where they're going to be looking to try to refit, resupply, in a sense, reconstitute so that they're kind of prepared for that counteroffensive. But we actually have a fair amount of skepticism as to whether or not the Russians will be, in fact, prepared to do that. And I think more optimistically for the Ukrainians.
The chair of the National Care Association has condemned Matt Hancock's account of how he managed care homes during the COVID pandemic as a deluded version of events. In his new book, the former health secretary insists the virus was mainly brought into facilities by infected staff. But in the early stages of the outbreak, COVID patients were discharged from hospitals into care homes without prior testing. England will face Senegal tonight in their first match in the knockout stage of the World Cup. The Africa Cup of Nations holders were runners-up in Group A. However, the Three Lions are favourites to go into the next round. Former England manager Sven-Göran Eriksson tells us why.
Up front, he has a lot of options. Harry Kane will play, I suppose, if he's fit, and he should play, of course. But then, who's playing around him? It can be Foden, it can be Sterling, Rashford, Saka, Grealish. He cannot play all of them, so yeah. I hope he played Foden and Rashford tonight. I hope so.
Football legend Pelé says he's feeling strong and hopeful after receiving further treatment for colon cancer. The 82-year-old was responding to reports claiming his treatment had been suspended after he was recently admitted to palliative care. His doctors say he is stable and responding well to treatment. Well, ahead of tonight's England game, captain Harry Kane described Pelé as an inspiration, said he cherished his advice and sent the best wishes from him and the squad. In boxing, Tyson Fury beat Derek Chisora in their WBC World Heavyweight title fight last night. The all-British bout was stopped by the referee in the 10th round at Tottenham Hotspur Stadium. Chisora battled hard but was outclassed by the Gypsy King, who retains his unbeaten record. Afterwards, Fury called out reigning IBF, IBO, WBO and WBA holder Alexander Usyk, who was watching ringside.
So yeah, I'm ready, I'm willing to take on Usyk next, whether it's going to be in Saudi Arabia or back here in the UK. It's both places will be fantastic. Let's give the fans one champion, one name, one face.
And with just 150 days until the King's coronation, the St Edward's crown has been removed from the Tower of London to be resized for King Charles III. Well, the King's ceremony is expected to be smaller and shorter than the late Queen, with around 2,000 guests instead of 8,000. But the core elements of the traditional service will remain. Royal commentator Michael Cole told GB News the coronation crown was first worn by Charles II.
Now, this crown is quite interesting. It's used only once in every reign. It weighs 5 pounds, and before her coronation, June the 2nd, 1953, and I do remember it, the Queen walked around the palace, and obviously in her day clothes, getting used to it because it is quite a technique to keep it steady and straight.
You're up to date on GB News. We'll bring you more news as it happens. Now, let's get back to Michael.
Thanks, Bethany. It's been another tumultuous week for the Conservative Party. On Monday, ex-Minister David Davis, backed by 50 other Conservative members of Parliament, wrote to the Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, demanding an effective response to illegal immigrants arriving on our shores. Today, it's rumoured that the government will legislate that illegal immigrants will not be allowed to settle here. There's talk of revising the Modern Slavery Act too, to prevent Albanians from using it to claim asylum. And once again, the speculation that Britain could withdraw from the European Convention on Human Rights. A YouGov poll reveals that 84% of the country believes that the government is doing badly on immigration. On Friday, Labour held the city of Chester in the by-election, where support for the Tories fell to just over 22%. If the swing from the Tories were replicated in a general election, Labour would win a sizable majority. On the same day, former Health Secretary and Chancellor Sajid Javid also announced that he won't stand at the next election, and that brings the number of Conservative MPs who are standing down to 13. There are also calls for the Tory party to suspend a member of Parliament who's being investigated over allegations of rape and sexual assault. And on top of all of that, Matt Hancock, back from his bush tucker trials in the jungle, has published his long-awaited Pandemic Diaries, justifying his performance as Health Secretary when thousands were sent from hospital to care homes where they died with COVID. With so many distractions, can the Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, and his cabinet concentrate on dealing with the cost of living crisis, recession and war in Ukraine? In a moment, we'll talk to MP Bob Seeley and William Atkinson, who's the Assistant Editor of Conservative at Home. But first, let's get some context from GB News political reporter Catherine Foster. Catherine, I wonder how Tory MPs will take these hints of new policies on illegal immigration. I mean, I suspect they might be quite weary, because have we not heard time and again before that the Modern Slavery Act might be reformed, that we might leave the European Convention, and that we might prevent people from settling here who are illegal immigrants?
We have heard a lot of this before, but I think what's becoming apparent is that the Conservatives really do need to do something different to get a grip of this. OK, Rishi Sunak got the new deal with France. We've had lots of deals with France before. They haven't been terribly effective. So something needs to change. I mean, Suella Braverman, the Home Secretary, has admitted that the system is broken and it is really hurting the Conservatives in the polls. I mean, we saw with Chester that broadly the polls giving Labour a large lead are correct. And so Conservatives are looking now and thinking, we're going to be out of a job. So this is one of several areas, but a very key area and where they can distinguish themselves from Labour, that they are going to get a grip. So Robert Jenrick, the Immigration Minister, was in the studio here yesterday. They're going to be, obviously, he's only been in that job for less than 5 weeks, but Rishi Sunak and he and Suella Braverman really do need to grip this and know that they need to.
But, Catherine, I mean, for example, this idea that you would not be allowed to settle if you had been an illegal immigrant, as far as I can see, the government's problem is that it can't get rid of anyone. It can't expel anyone from the country. So that seems to me to be a threat, absolutely, without any force or bite.
Well, they're probably going to have to look at tweaking the Modern Slavery Act, aren't they? Certainly David Davis, when he sent the letter earlier in the week, pointed out to a graph that Albanians specifically, that are now making about a third of the people coming across the Channel on small boats, that most of the other countries in Europe take almost none of them, that almost none of their asylum applications are successful, whereas in Britain it's a much higher number. So clearly they need to make it clear that if you come here, you're not going to be successful.
Bob Seeley, Conservative Member of Parliament, nodding vigorously at that point. But why were you nodding?
I signed the letter, and look, if you come here from a safe country, it's absurd that there's a 50% success rate for your asylum application. It's just bonkers. So
and that, by the way, completely undermines the government's policy, doesn't it? Because if more than 50% are in the end going to be granted asylum, then we have only a limited right to try to stop them from coming here.
So the more that we can tighten up, better. And look, absolutely right, we need to do more to improve the system. I take issue with what you say, Michael, about tumultuous week. This is a week in politics. We're going to have a very, very busy 2 years. You've got huge global events happening. You've got the inflation caused by spending $400 billion on COVID. You've got the Ukraine war, which has pushed up food prices, which has pushed up energy prices, which is playing chaos in many markets throughout the world. So we are dealing with a series of crises. So people are angry and concerned. But, sorry, in many ways what we're getting back to is doing politics as normal. The government has an agenda. People like me support that agenda. But we want to see how we, as backbench MPs, can improve that agenda. So there's give and take. And actually what you're going to see in the coming weeks is evidence not of a party at war with itself, but actually as a party getting its grip together, getting its act together, and actually us contributing to the work of government to do good stuff. So I
remember a normality that may be older than the normality that you remember.
Yeah.
And it seems to me now that rebellion is more or less routine, that the party can scarcely take for granted any measure of support.
No, I disagree, because it depends on... The problem is you've got this dichotomy. Either people say MPs are just sort of these tame sheep that sort of loyally follow their shepherds through the voting lobbies, or we're all mad, rebellious, sort of mountain peasants sort of kicking off at the first sign of trouble. Look, the government has an agenda, and people like me want to play a part in that agenda, because I'm not a minister, but, you know, I care about policy. I want to see the government re-elected. I think Rishi Sunak's going to be a great Prime Minister. The best way I help is by doing my job as a parliamentarian as best I can, representing the good folks of the Isle of Wight, thinking what's in their interest, what can I get for them, and then making that work. That's a sign that politics is working. The culture may slightly have changed from the 80s and 90s, but actually getting stuff through with the support of independent-minded folks actually makes government stronger.
Let me meet you halfway and say that I'm quite surprised that commentators haven't made more of the following fact, that for Labour to win the next general election, it needs an absolutely enormous swing. It has had enormous swings in the past, 1945 and 1997, how could I forget? But it strikes me that when there were those swings, people were not just fed up with the Conservative government. What also happened was they were hugely enthusiastic for Labour that had a vision for the future, which they really believed believed in. That is not the position today.
No, and you make a really good point, Michael. Look, 15 months ago, we were talking about a decade of Boris Johnson. Well, you know, look how that turned out. And now we're talking about the Tories are doomed for a decade. I just think we need to get away from this roller coaster conversation. There are going to be an important series of junctions, to use a railway metaphor. You know, next spring, next summer, let's see where we are with global inflation, with jobs, with the state of the economy. But I think, look, I'm a glass half full kind of person, and I think there's everything to play for the next 18 months, 2 years, and I think actually Rishi's doing a pretty good job.
Let me ask William Atkinson from Conservative Home how full his glass is. Let me just ask you this question. Is there any way that the Tories could recover between now and the next election in order not to lose it?
Certainly. I think the point that Bob makes, that we've had a very, very busy year in politics, I should know, it's my first year actually working in it, suggests that a lot can change very quickly, and that we live in a political environment where, rather than a week being a long time in politics, now it feels like even an hour or two is relatively fast-paced. So I think certainly there is the potential for the Tories to recover, for the fundamental fact that I think Rishi Sunak is probably the best Prime Minister we've had in quite a while. He's obviously coming to the wicket in particularly poor circumstances, but he's already shown an ability to actually understand the most fundamental part of governing, which is an ability to strategise, an ability to work out that you have to take particular issues at a time. So since he's come to power, he immediately dealt with the ongoing economic turmoil that was largely a product of Trussonomics, with the sort of autumn statement that we had, which has stabilised the situation in the markets, but also laid out essentially the government's fiscal plan for the next few years. And now, as far as we know, all of his focus is directed on dealing with the small boats crisis. And now going back even before Partygate last year, that was what first started to hit the Tories' ratings in the polls, was that voters could see day by day, as these small boats arrived across the Channel, that the government was incompetent and the government was unable to do its fundamental job of protecting our borders. And that's eroded confidence in the government ever since. And Sunak knows that he will only win back those voters who either switched the Tories in 2019 or have been moving towards them over the last decade, who have left them now over the incompetence they've shown and over the farce of the last year, if he can prove that he can actually succeed on that issue.
You have raised excellent points for me to put to Bob Seeley. You see, I would say that if we're dealing with precedents, one precedent is what happened to the Tories after that so-called Black Wednesday. So I think it's quite hard to see how the public forgive the Tories for Trussonomics, because this put up people's interest rates. It got them extremely scared. And William says that the Prime Minister is going to concentrate on the boat issue. He's not going to solve the boat issue. And if he stakes his reputation on the boat issue, that may be very serious for him.
I think, OK, William, I agree with what William said on a couple of points. He said that Rishi is a very good strategiser and he's very dynamic, and he's actually going to, even when he knew he was losing the leadership campaign, when he came down to the Isle of Wight and talked to us in the Shanklin Conservative Club, he was brimming, absolutely brimming with energy. And I actually have to say, I thought to myself, good on you, mate. That is, you know, you are a fighter, and he's going to need that energy. So Rishi is strategising a way through a series of issues that he faces. The planning rebellion, which I'm leading with Theresa Villiers. Let's see what happens with that next week. And then the small boats issue, then the economic crisis, then the Ukraine issue. So I think he does prioritise. I think he focuses on the nearest crisis. We are going to have to go further on immigration. But again, you know, eventually, Michael, people are going to have to say, I'm unhappy, you know, that this is costing more, that's costing more, that bill's going up. But who do I think is going to deal with the problem? The Conservative Party, who are trying to get a grip and are doing 60% or 90% solutions on stuff, or a Labour Party, which is not only untried, but actually is still full of Marxists.
Catherine, very, very briefly, if you would. My contention that the boats issue cannot be solved by Rishi Sunak. He's taking a risk if he puts his reputation on it. What do you think?
Yes, he is, but ultimately, I think the economy, inflation, how much people have in their pockets at the next election will be more important. I do think it's the economy stupid does still stand, but it is very visible and it's very damaging. And of course, Brexit, take back control of our borders, and we're very visibly not doing that.
I thought that was a super discussion. Thank you to Catherine Foster, Bob Seeley MP and William Atkinson. Coming up, Nigel Lawson once described the National Health Service as the closest thing that the English have to a national religion. But with more spent on it than ever before and 7 million people now waiting for treatment, have we now lost the faith? That's after the break.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prison.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. In just over a week, 100,000 nurses are due to go on strike in England, Northern Ireland and most of Wales. It's the first time that the Royal College of Nursing has taken such action. Also due to strike are paramedics, call handlers and other staff at 10 ambulance services. And it seems that barely a day goes by without another horror story from a patient about poor treatment. And all this as funding for the NHS increases every year. Total spending on healthcare was, in 2021, £277 billion. That equated to 11.9% of GDP and an increase of 7.4% on the previous year. And currently there are 7.1 million people on NHS waiting lists. Is it enough to go on spending money on the NHS, or is it time radically to reform the way that we provide healthcare in this country? You may remember that a few weeks ago, Will Quince, the Minister of State at the Department of Health and Social Care, joined us on the programme. Professor Jonathan Beard, who has been a full-time consultant vascular surgeon for 30 years, says that when he started working 30 years ago, he was able to do twice as many operations as he's able to do now. I think he may have retired, as he was able to do when he was retiring. And this is because of bureaucracy and inefficiency in the health service. How, after so many years of Conservative government, can bureaucracy and inefficiency in the health service be making a surgeon cut his list to 50%?
Well, I'm genuinely surprised to hear that, and I'd love to meet with him to find out exactly why he feels that way.
Well, I'm happy to say that today I'm joined by Dr. Jonathan Beard, as well as by orthopaedic surgeon Chris Wilson and Christopher Snowden, Head of Lifestyle Economics at the IA. And we did, of course, ask Mr. Quince to join us, but he was unavailable. Professor Jonathan Beard, tell me about the experience that you had, please. Why you wrote this letter. Tell me what it was you were writing about.
Well, it was in response to the previous articles that have been talking about weekend working, which is also a big problem. But I felt it was important to also talk about the weekday working problems, which increased in size all the time I was a consultant. And it's not just me who's saying this. every consultant I work with and speak with has the same problem. And there's been a lot of research done which shows that there are massive problems with workplace inefficiency in the NHS, in my sphere, obviously, around theatres. And there are very simple measures to deal with it, which haven't been undertaken.
But explain to lay people watching this programme how it is that you cannot get the patients into the theatre at 8:30 in the morning when you start and have a run of patients all the way through, leaving you to do the operations and other people to manage getting the patients there. Why is that not possible?
Well, it's multifactorial, and the other problem is, of course, that not everyone's signed up to the priority, which is the patient's operation. Rather like the toilet attendants at NASA, knowing that they are part of the team that gets the person into space and onto the moon. Is pervasive throughout the NHS.
Who is not signed up to getting patients into theatres?
Okay, so it's always multifactorial. It's always somebody else's fault. You send for the patients, and then you find there aren't enough porters, or the porters are doing something else, and then you find that somebody has forgotten to send for the patient, and then you find that the patient isn't ready, despite the fact that they've been on a published list for the last 24 hours. Before that happens, of course, you can't start the list until you know there's a bed available, because if they're going back to a critical care bed afterwards, the critical care bed has to be available as well. Otherwise, you can't start the operation. So you have to have a bed to start with for the patient to come from, which means making sure that patients have been discharged back to home or social care. And of course, there's a massive problem with the lack of social care beds, which is increasing. And then there's where do you send them afterwards? So both of those things have to be ticked. And of course, most of the managers don't come on until 9 o'clock. So unsurprisingly, we have to wait till about 10 o'clock before anything happens.
You apparently offered a case of champagne if on any occasion they could get the first patient to you on schedule at 8:30, and the case of champagne was never claimed. Some of the issues you mentioned, I think possibly most of the issues you mentioned, didn't require more money or more people. They just required better organisation.
Yes, and there's been very good articles in the British Medical Journal repeatedly before the COVID pandemic with very simple measures that have been that were instigated by theatre teams themselves, largely based on Lean and Six Sigma technology, which is very well established, which essentially says that you need to get the workers on side and get the workers involved in the changes. In response to all this, the Healthcare England have produced a 1,500-page document called the Productive Operating Theatre, which is, and I printed off one of their 15 modules. This is one here. It almost killed my printer because, unbelievably, it's got full-page colour pictures and then completely blank pages of green ink, which just use your ink up and take 20 minutes to print off. I gave up on trying to print any more of them off, but it has no executive summary. There's no clear explanation of the aims and objectives for the theatre staff. It doesn't actually involve the theatre staff. This is a trust-down, managerial-led initiative which is doomed to failure.
OK, deeply depressing what you say. Chris Wilson, orthopaedic surgeon, tell me about some of your experiences. I've been asked to emphasise that you're speaking entirely for yourself, which I'm happy to do. Your experiences and where you think some of the solutions might lie.
Well, I can echo what I've been told. I was smiling when I heard some of those recollections because most senior surgeons in the country will resonate with them. What people have to understand is that the rate limiting factor for efficient theatres is not generally the surgeon. They might imagine that if we're not getting enough hip replacements or knee replacements or whatever done, it's because there's a shortage of surgeons. But in fact, that's the very last part of the problem. An example would be a well-known big hospital with 8 theatres ready to roll. first thing in the morning, all the teams in place, ready for 8 o'clock starts. The patients all get sent for roughly the same time, and there are 3 theatre porters. So obviously 5 of those theatres are going to have a late start. So the theatres are forced to compete for a scarce resource, and the scarce resource is the theatre porter. It will be cheaper and more efficient for the trust to employ more theatre porters and to redeploy them in between times. But the jobs tend to be in silos, and there doesn't appear to be any will in the organisation for, if you like, cross-discipline working, even at the level of the porters, who, by the way, work very hard. The theatre porters is a very, very busy job, but at crucial times there aren't enough of them. That's just one example of how a simple, small tweak introduces a massive inefficiency and leads to a very expensive theatre team of surgeon, anaesthetist, trainee, ODP, etc., sitting around twiddling their thumbs for half an hour or more. And that's probably replicated across much of the NHS when we're looking to do more operations, get more bang for your bucks, if you like.
Let me bring in, if I may, Let me bring in Christopher Snowdon, who's a think tanker. I think you think that radical reform is required. That's a possible answer. But how do you react to what we've just heard, which is that really rather simple things could make an enormous difference to the efficiency of the health service?
Well, it's absolutely true in theory. You've heard 2 very good examples of there. I speak to doctors and nurses from time to time and hear the same kind of things, often seem relatively easy to fix. So you've heard from 2 people who really know what they're talking about, who, if they were given control, I dare say, could do something about it. But nobody really does have control. I don't think anyone fully can get a grip on the NHS. It's just too enormous. Even the head of the NHS, I very much doubt really understands the entire workings of it. So you will hear from various different people within the system, particularly medics, this is what's going wrong, this is what needs fixing. But it never happens. And people, they give up even trying to change things because the bureaucracy is constantly weighing down them and stopping them. And I think the ultimate solution is that you need to have the capacity to fail and go out of business. The problem with the NHS, it doesn't matter how much parts of it fail, it can never go out of business. And so you never have any kind of creative destruction and renewal and people who don't know what they're doing, getting sacked, failing parts of the NHS closing down, being bought up by somebody else and starting again. So you've had this now for over 70 years where the pit of money is bottomless. You've seen 277 billion all told for healthcare, most of that obviously on the NHS, and nothing can change, and people get sick of it, and that's why they move to Australia. Nothing ever improves, no matter how many top-down reforms you have, and that's because you're not dealing with the fundamental problem, which is a lack of competition, no price mechanism, no profit motive.
Right, and you want to introduce those 3 elements. Very briefly, Christopher Snowdon, tell me how you would introduce those 3 elements.
Oh, you need to break up the NHS, essentially privatise it, and then look around the rest of Europe for a start, or Australia or New Zealand, see how they do it, see how they are able to provide healthcare free at the point of use, which is the only thing that people really like about the NHS when it comes down to it. They don't really care who's providing the healthcare, so long as it's universal and free at the point of use. The rest of the world can do this pretty successfully. We do it really badly. We have a winter crisis every single year. It's not just this year. Most countries don't.
Oh, well, let me just go back to the medics then. So, first of all, Jonathan Beard, do you have any truck with what you've just heard Christopher Snowdon say? Did you reach the stage of exasperation that you thought a radical reform of that sort might be required?
Well, yes, I'm very exasperated with the NHS. I actually got suspended from duty because I went down and collected a patient by myself because there weren't enough porters. And I was suspended because that wasn't my job and I wasn't allowed to do it. So they actually, rather than responding to the problem, they just suspended me, which made the problem worse. So I'm not sure about the competition thing. I think most people going to the NHS go into it because they have a deep commitment to helping people. The problem is that every hospital is a microcosm of the NHS. It's a top-down, heavily managerial-led system, and we are told what to do. There's no input back up. There's no feeling of involvement by the increasing lack of feeling of involvement by the staff on the ground. And so if you make it a private employer with the same attitude, the same problem will happen.
Let me go to Chris Wilson for the final point. In a way, I would have thought the National Health Service was an ideal organisation in that if best practice is established somewhere, if one hospital does something really well, then it ought to be possible to replicate what they're doing endlessly through the National Health Service. Why does that not happen?
Well, several points. First of all, I do not agree with the free market analysis. I have to say that. At this point, there are many different competing strands of thought, and what the government could do tomorrow is establish a royal commission, which is long overdue, take evidence from all stakeholders, as the jargon goes, and produce a white paper, because the whole thing needs a root and branch reform. And we need to train more doctors. We need to remove the cap on medical school places, which is ridiculous. And we need to start planning for 15 years ahead. But in the short to medium term, I think we're trying to establish best practice across surgical specialties, but the Royal Colleges, GERF, NICE are doing quite a good job. But on the vexed issue of these very short-term irritations, if you like, not enough theatre porters, it would be a classic example, then I think that a slightly, if you like, a slightly stronger management control of what the various units are up to, and some form of accountability of why lists are starting late, and what the requirements are to prevent that happening is required in the short term. Because at the present time, that's not happening. People just drift on.
Amazing. Amazing and shocking, but I'm extremely grateful to you for your expertise, your wisdom and your contribution today. That's Chris Wilson, Dr. Jonathan Beard and Christopher Snowdon. 70 years ago, Londoners woke to a thick smog, the like of which had never been seen. It was so dense that people couldn't see their own feet. It was toxic enough to leave between 4,000 and 10,000 people dead, according to different estimates. Even cows died in the fields. Smog had been a developing problem in London since the 1700s. The Industrial Revolution increased the burning of coal, which polluted the air. The Great Smog ultimately led to the Clean Air Act of 1956, but 70 years on, although we don't have smogs anymore, air pollution is still a problem. In 2013, 9-year-old Ella Adu-Kissi Deborah became the first person to have air pollution listed as a cause of death. Dr. Christine Corton is the author of London Fog, the biography, and Simon Burkitt is the founder and director of Clean Air in London. So let's begin by looking back to 1952 and the terrible smog. Tell us about it.
Yes, Michael. Well, thank you for inviting me. It affected all the senses, basically. You could not see your hand in front of your face. It was, a writer described it as tasting like iron filings in the back of the throat. It was sulphurous in terms of the smell. It muffled the sound, so you felt like you were completely on your own, cocooned. Buses, the bus conductors, remember them? They used to have to get out in front of buses and just lead them forward because it was so thick you couldn't actually see where the road ended and the path began. So it affected everything. And as you said, it affected animals as well. So the Smithville Cattle Show, which always was held in December, cattle were affected. Their lungs filled up with these particulates that were so large that it would actually cause them to kind of almost suffocate. People, obviously, with emphysema, any lung conditions, babies, vulnerable people, would literally die within perhaps a day or even 3-4 weeks. That's why the estimates are it's so difficult to know how many people died.
As we've seen with COVID, it's hard to assign the deaths. What was the cause?
Smoke from domestic chimneys, smoke from industrial chimneys, the power stations, which had actually their smoke washed before the Second World War, was no longer washed, so that was also coming out dirty. So it was just general pollution. People, of course, when it got cold, they would bank up their fires with slack. And that would be very smoky overnight, and that would fill the air with these noxious fumes.
But it met a weather condition where
it did.
Where what the air was static, or what was
Well, yes, London had a natural fog problem. I mean, we're in a slight basin, there are rivers running through it, so it's got a natural damp air. And of course, when there was a kind of period of no wind, very, as you say, stagnant air, it would then fill with these noxious fumes and then create this mixture that would literally kind of kill people, animals and flowers. At Kew, they noted that many of the flowers just died during a fog.
And although the London smog is very famous, we should mention that this affected many other British cities. They also had their smog problem too.
They did. Manchester had its smoke problem. All major industrial cities did. But many of them wanted to kind of get rid of it. They didn't glamorise it. They didn't romanticise it. For Londoners, they gave it these very romantic names, London Particular, London Ivy, Pea Super. In many ways, Londoners slightly loved it. It's a measure of success. If you've got smoke pumping into the air, it means your industries are working hard. It means that you can afford coal on your fire. And, you know, as one MP said, housewives love their open fire and they're not going to take easily to central heating.
I'm going to turn to Simon now for an update. How worried should we be about pollution today?
Well, air pollution is still the world's largest environmental health risk. It kills an estimated 7 million people a year. And I think the important thing to understand about the difference between then and now is that then we were worried about respiratory effects from breathing, from short-term exposure to very visible particles from coal burning. And it wasn't actually until the 1990s that scientists actually in the United States found, by looking across 6 cities, that the more polluted cities had more people dying early. And what they discovered was that actually thousands of people die every year from cardiovascular effects, so heart attacks and strokes, from long-term exposure to invisible air pollution, the so-called PM2.5 that you hear about. So in London, we had, as Christina said, you know, about 4,000 people died within a few days because of that smog in London. Now we estimate that about 4,000 people a year die from particle air pollution in London, but that's from invisible fine particles. So,
and if it's invisible, is it much more difficult to legislate about?
No, because ultimately this is mainly a combustion problem. Particles come from all sources, so it can be Saharan dust, for example. It's also ammonia from agriculture combines in the air to become fine particles as well. So there are different sources, but they are controllable. And the plans and the legislation that's in place should actually get the modern pollution down to the new World Health Organization air quality guidelines across most of the UK by about 2030.
Because the legislation will do what? Ban this, that and the other?
It's a mixture of technology, you know, putting filters on things, but also moving, for example, from combustion vehicles to electric vehicles, you know, and things like that. But, you know, cleaning up industry, cleaning up vehicles, and using best practices in agriculture, which is not done very much here in terms of pollution control, in terms of manure and ammonia, urea fertilizers. But best practices that are done by other countries would reduce a lot of that problem here as well.
Well, let's hope we can move forward on that. Christine, thank you for coming in. You really described that filthy smog extremely well. Thank you very much indeed, Simon Burkett, as well.
Thank you.
So, coming up, the fallout from the funding announcement by Arts Council England. Many London-based organisations are losing their funding. So is this levelling up or is it cultural vandalism? That's after the break.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Deebs & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. on TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
Why not take us home with you by visiting the GB News shop at gbnews.store? You'll find all the official merchandise, a really good present actually for yourself, your friends or your family.
We ship across the UK mainland at no extra cost. GB News, the People's Channel.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
The guy went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions.
I have no time for cultural totalitarianism.
We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Welcome back. As part of the Levelling Up programme, funding for the arts is being redistributed across England. Last month, Arts Council England announced that it was cutting £50 million a year from arts organisations in London and diverting the money to regional companies. Overnight, some organisations, including the English National Opera and the Donmar Warehouse Theatre, have lost 100% of their guaranteed funding. Dr. Harry Brunges, who chairs the English National Opera, told me that it would be hard for the ENO to continue in its current form. This effectively bring the curtain down on the English National Opera?
It will bring the curtain down on English National Opera at its home, the London Coliseum. It's been our home for 55 years, and as a company, we are approaching our centenary. So there's not been a more dramatic or operatic dramatic moment in the history of the company.
Since the decision, organisations including the Actors Union Equity, the Musicians Union and BECTU, the Broadcasting, Entertainment, Communications and Theatre Union, have staged a protest outside the Department of Culture, Media and Sport. Actor Juliet Stevenson called it an agenda of cultural vandalism. And this week on Thursday, the Chief Executive Officer of Arts Council England, Darren Henley, will answer questions about the funding at the DCMS Select Committee in Parliament. The redistribution is designed to bring cultural opportunities to places that have been underfunded in the past. 276 organisations that have never before had funding will now receive grants. Stefan Kyriazis, the arts editor of Express Online, joins me now. As you look around the London scene, can you see any justification for removing money from London stages?
No one ever wants to see money taken away, clearly, from the arts, so this is never a good thing. But I think there's a sense that sometimes London is very established and content in what it has, and perhaps takes audiences a little bit for granted, or there's a little bit of a sense that sometimes there's an echo chamber, that the people that put on the shows are producing the things that they are interested in, and only watched by a small amount of people that are also already interested in that. I don't know that things are always translating. Of course, we want things to be exploring new themes, exploring contemporary themes, but I've seen too many shows either that just simply didn't work, that felt self-indulgent, or that were not selling tickets, crucially, not selling tickets.
But they were funded by the taxpayer?
From one organisation that has had some of its funding removed, yes.
On the other hand, I think you've been to see a play recently that did justify its audience.
Absolutely.
Fascinating play. Tell me about it.
It's wonderful. It's very much about everything that our modern world as well, which is as it should be. Best of Enemies. It's about 1968. Gore Vidal, the incredible left-wing intellectual, and opposition on a TV. It was about the American presidential campaigns. And it was the first time that TV News actually presented opinions and revelled in contrasting. So they verbatim recreate the debates on TV. They are deliciously vicious, but they're very much about the change in how we consume the news, how we present political debate, how we present debate at all.
Gore Vidal on the left of the argument, and William F. Buckley Jr., and they did indeed trade insults. For people who want to see this, you can see some of this stuff online. I mean, you can see the original debates online, and it translates well to the stage, does it?
Fantastically well. Number one, it's entertaining. So you are having a high old time, and they are absolutely hilarious, some of their exchanges. But it's deeply thoughtful, thought-provoking. It's very important. It reflects absolutely what is happening now, the way that we consume things. And it was at a time of huge social unrest as well.
That was Best of Enemies that we were talking about there. I'm joined now by Owen Calvert-Lyons, who's Artistic Director and CEO of the Theatre Royal in Bury St Edmunds, and by Adam Bergen, the Theatre Manager for the Ottergood Theatre and Westlands Entertainment Venue. Thank you to both of us for joining us. Adam, tell me, what has been your recent experience? Have you benefited from levelling up?
We certainly have. South Somerset was designated a priority place by the Arts Council, and we're delighted that our NPO application, our very first, was successful, and £760,000 will be invested into delivering cultural activity for the good people of South Somerset and trying to provide opportunities for them to benefit from the creative arts. And our bid was very much targeted around audiences and people from disadvantaged backgrounds that may not have benefited from music and theatre and dance and opportunities that you might take for granted elsewhere. So it's amazing news for us and very exciting times for Somerset.
And Owen Calvert-Lyons, tell me, did you get a nice present before Christmas?
Absolutely, we did, Michael. Yes, £220,000 every year from 2023 for 3 years. Similarly to Adam's experience, that will allow us to do extraordinary things in West Suffolk. Lots of work with children and young people. Great opportunities like touring plays across to rural primary schools. So we're really excited about what the future holds for Theatre Royal Bury St Edmunds.
Give us an example, Owen, of things you'll be able to do that you couldn't have done otherwise.
Well, next year we'll be running a project called Tiny Plays, Big Ideas, which will teach 500 primary school children to write their first play. All of those plays will then be performed by professional actors. We'll run the Doorstep Festival, which will tour productions to rural primary schools. We'll run our own participation festival, which will allow children and young people and older adults to perform on our stages. So it will have a whole range of benefits across the area, particularly focusing on vulnerable communities.
And Adam Bergen, do you find as well that a lot of the work you're going to be doing is, if I could put it broadly, outreach, rather than simply changing or increasing what's going to appear on your boards, on your stage?
I think it will be a mixture of the two. We've developed a partnership and announced that recently with Bournemouth Symphony Orchestra, and you're absolutely right. Part of that is about providing access for schools concerts, or kind of going into rural villages and making sure that there is access there. But it will also very much help develop what's on our stage. And part of our programme also was about commissioning work. So it's about telling the stories from Somerset. It's about making sure that the work is relevant to our audiences, and that the amazing kind of folklore and stories of Somerset are told as well. So really exciting across the board, I think.
So, Adam Bergen, why do you think it is that Juliet Stevenson can describe what's happening as cultural vandalism?
I think any kind of reduction in funding to the arts is always very difficult, and that redistribution. And I think kind of you in London, it is incredibly special. We're also kind of proud of our capital city as a world city where those great arts organisations exist. So I think we're all concerned about the future of ENO. I've been lucky enough to kind of been and enjoy some of their experiences, but I think it's important as well we recognise that not everyone does have that access, and it's important that the kind of funding does reach areas like Somerset, like Cumbria and others, so that all our kind of people get to benefit from those creative arts. And while kind of a member of the Arts Council said to me, talent is everywhere and opportunity is not. And that's certainly the case if you're growing up in kind of more rural areas that haven't had the levels of funding that we're starting to see being redistributed, which is really good news for areas like ours.
Owen and Calvert-Lyons, if we lose the excellence of the English National Opera, can you be doing things in the regions that can possibly make up for that loss of excellence?
Absolutely, yes. I think there is extraordinary talent, as Adam says, all across this country. Some of the greatest plays and the greatest performers and artists have come up through regional theatre. So it's a vital part of the cultural economy. As Adam also says, none of us want to see organisations lose their funding. So none of us will take any pleasure in those London organisations not receiving funding. But it would be crazy for us to imagine that great art only happens in our capital.
Absolutely. Stefan, listening to that, I don't need a lot of persuading that giving money to regional theatres is a good idea. What I noticed in the press release, though, was that there was an enormous number of organisations that was receiving extra money, therefore very, very thinly spread. And I wondered whether all of the organisations were going to be as excellent as the two theatres we've just been talking about and to.
I mean, I think everybody would be happy with any money is better than no money, wherever it may go. I know I'm from Southampton, for example, which has benefited again with the Mayflower Studios. And again, what the gentlemen are talking about is a lot of programmes for young people, for encouraging people to be trained. Everybody would always want more money. That's absolutely without a doubt. You also need to encourage the public to go and see things, which is where ticketing and money comes from. But I think there, like the guy said, there is so much excellence out there. I was shocked and a little bit upset at first when I saw all the cuts, but the more I read through and the more I see, there is only a limited amount of money, and it seems like they're doing as much as they can to spread it as fairly as they can. There's not enough money. We would like more money, but it's a start, I think.
I suppose I will need some convincing when I see the balance sheet about the excellence we've lost and the excellence that we have gained. But let it be said, in case people are listening there absolutely shouting at the television, that, of course, London will still get, not the lion's share, but I think about 30% of the total benefit, which on a per capita basis is hugely more than other regions.
Absolutely. 5 boroughs in London are still in the top 10 of the amount of money allocated. So there is still a tremendous amount of money coming into London. And London also benefits from tourism. So the ticketing is coming. There is money coming in that's not just locally based.
There's going to be a lot of debate about this, no doubt. Thanks to Stefan Kyriazis, Owen Calvert-Lyons and Adam Bergen. Coming up, are you happy? And how do you spread your happiness to do the most good? And as Harry and Meghan star in their own docuseries, is it now all-out war between the houses of Wales and Sussex? That's all after the weather.
Looking ahead to today's weather, and the UK is looking fairly grey for many with a chilly easterly breeze. Let's take a look at the details. Areas in the far southwest of England may see the odd brighter spell, but the cloud will make it a grey day for most. Showers will also reach southern coasts of Cornwall. Like much of the UK, southeast England will experience a keen breeze through today. This will make it feel closer to 2 degrees Celsius. A little light rain is possible for southern Wales, and this may include a small amount of sleet over higher ground. Central areas of England will tend to stay drier, but there'll still be a large amount of cloud around, making it a rather dull second half of the weekend for many. It's eastern coasts that'll see the most frequent showers, the occasional one of which may be heavy. They'll feed inland on the brisk breeze, so it's worth holding on to an umbrella. The showers and cloud will push into eastern Scotland, however the northwest of Scotland will likely see the brightest skies across the UK today with some sunny spells. Western counties of Northern Ireland are also in with a chance of seeing some sunshine today, but eastern coasts will be affected by scattered showers from the Irish Sea. We'll retain a very similar setup through this afternoon and evening with further showers in the east, and that's how the weather's shaping up for the rest of today.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
We are GB News, right across the nation. You can get us on television, on radio, on digital. We're absolutely everywhere.
Amazing! You see, amazing!
You remind me of me in the European Parliament. But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel.
Magnificent. That's really, really thoughtful.
Come and join us on GB News, the People's News Channel.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Join me, Nana Akue, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today!
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel.
Good morning and welcome back to Sunday with Michael Portillo, filling your Sunday mornings with good conversation, arts and entertainment. Coming up in the next hour, if you're happy, how can you make sure that you spread your happiness for the greatest good? I take a taxi ride through London. And the taste of Cornwall, our reporter Jeff Moody will be sampling the best of what the region has to offer. That's all to come after the news with Bethany.
Michael, thank you. Good morning. It's 1 minute past 11. I'm Bethany Elsey in the GB newsroom. Border Force officers and firefighters could be replaced by military personnel during strikes over the Christmas period. It's part of contingency plans announced by the government. Around 2,000 members of the armed forces are now being trained alongside civil servants and volunteers to help limit disruption. The head of the police watchdog has been forced to resign over an historical allegation. It's now emerged Michael Lockwood, who's been the Director General of the Independent Office for Police Conduct since 2018, is facing a criminal investigation. The Home Secretary, Suella Braverman, says she asked him to quit or face immediate suspension after learning about the probe. When he announced his resignation on Friday, he said it was for personal and domestic reasons. The conflict in Ukraine is slowing down and US intelligence officials say they expect that to continue over the winter months. Washington says Kyiv's economy is now suffering after Russia launched attacks targeting its power grid and other critical infrastructure. The Director of National Intelligence, Avril Haines, believes there will be a successful Ukrainian counteroffensive in the new year.
We expect that, frankly, both militaries are going to be in a situation where they're going to be looking to try to refit, resupply, in a sense, reconstitute so that they're kind of prepared for that counteroffensive. But we actually have a fair amount of skepticism as to whether or not the Russians will be, in fact, prepared to do that. And I think more optimistically for the Ukrainians.
The chair of the National Care Association has condemned Matt Hancock's account of how he managed care homes during the COVID pandemic as a deluded version of events. In his new book, the former health secretary insists the virus was mainly brought into facilities by infected staff. But in the early stages of the outbreak, COVID patients were discharged from hospitals into care homes without prior testing. England will face Senegal tonight in their first match in the knockout stages of the World Cup. The Africa Cup of Nations holders were runners-up in Group A, but the Three Lions are favourites to go into the next round. Former England manager Sven-Goran Eriksson tells us why.
Up front, he has a lot of options. Harry Kane will play, I suppose, if he's fit, and he should play, of course. But then, who's playing around him? It can be Foden, it can be Sterling, Rashford, Saka, Grealish. He cannot play all of them, so yeah. I hope he played Foden and Rashford tonight. I hope so.
Well, England fans in Qatar are optimistic.
You feeling hopeful?
I'm very hopeful.
Score prediction?
3-1 England.
Okay. How are you feeling about tonight, guys?
Incredibly nervous. We know it's going to be a tough game, and it's never easy at this stage. You know, the group stages are out the way. Anything can happen. Senegal have got a great team, and it's going to be a tough one.
Prediction?
3-1 England.
He's way too optimistic. I'm going to go 2-1, maybe after extra time, but then I'll be in tears, so let's not go that far.
All right,
and hopefully no penalties.
Football legend Pelé says he's feeling strong and hopeful after receiving further treatment for colon cancer. The 82-year-old was responding to reports claiming his treatment had been suspended after he was recently admitted to palliative care. His doctors say he's stable and responding well to treatment. Ahead of tonight's England game, captain Harry Kane described Pelé as an inspiration, said he cherished his advice and sent the best wishes of him and the squad. In boxing, Tyson Fury beat Derek Chisora in the WBC World Heavyweight title fight last night. The all-British bout was stopped by the referee in the 10th round at Tottenham Hotspur Stadium. Chisora battled hard but was outclassed by the Gypsy King, who retains his unbeaten record. And with just 150 days until the King's coronation, the St Edward's crown has been removed from the Tower of London to be resized for the King. King Charles III's ceremony is expected to be smaller and shorter than the late Queen, with around 2,000 guests instead of 8,000. But the core elements of the traditional service will remain. Royal commentator Michael Cole told GBNews the coronation crown was first worn by Charles II.
Now, this crown is quite interesting. It's used only once in every reign. It weighs 5 pounds, and before her coronation, June the 2nd, 1953, and I do remember it, the Queen walked around the palace, and obviously in her day clothes, getting used to it because it is quite a technique to keep it steady and straight.
You're up to date on GB News. We'll bring you more news as it happens. Now let's get back to Michael.
Thanks, Bethany. We are in the darkest days of winter. The UK is facing a cost of living crisis and a winter of strikes. The conflict in Ukraine is not going to be resolved anytime soon. Things are gloomy. But the United Kingdom is a pretty happy country. According to the World Happiness Index, we are ranked 16 out of 146 countries. What is meant by happiness? How is it measured? And how can you use happiness to do the most good? Dr. Michael Plant is founder and director of the Happier Lives Institute and joins me now. First of all, welcome, by the way. Do you have any idea how, in this happiness index, it is calculated that we are 16th?
Yeah, so from the World Happiness Report, you just simply, people are asked 0 to 10, how satisfied are you with your life, from not at all to completely. And it's from these data that people now know that the Scandinavian countries are happiest in the world. It's a measure of life satisfaction, which is slightly different from happiness, which is how you feel. So life satisfaction is a judgment of life. And that's how we end up with our ranking.
I think it's Finland that quite regularly comes out number top.
Yeah, so the Scandinavians are the consistent winners on the life satisfaction chart.
And, this is puzzling to some of us because alcohol there is extremely expensive. And in the winter, it's extraordinarily dark. And in the summer, you can't go to sleep because it's extraordinarily light. So why is it, do you think, that people there, and indeed people in Britain at number 16 in the chart, are feeling some sort of contentment?
So the World Happiness Report breaks it down into a number of factors. I'm not sure of which I can remember all of them, but it's looking at income, trust, quality of government, measures of corruption. But I think the story for the Scandinavian countries is that they have quite generous welfare states. It's quite easy to live a good life. There's a good sense of cultural unity, and these are the sort of things which contribute to feeling like life is going well overall.
Yes. I don't know how much people are aware of these things, but it seems to me that things like a raucous free press, absolute freedom of expression, well, with the occasional cancellation here and there, relatively low levels of corruption, the rule of law, democracy, which means that if you're very unhappy with your government, at least you can look forward to the moment at which you get rid of it. All these things, it would seem to me, would make one feel more content.
Yeah, so very often the happiness research tells us what we already know. So you're just asking people how they feel, and we already have views about what we think contributes to the good life. The advantage of focusing directly on measuring it is that if you can't measure it and put numbers on it, then you can't properly compare it. You can't really take it seriously. No one really knows how GDP is constructed, but we believe in it, and we know that it's good if it goes up and bad if it goes down, or at least that's what we think. So it would be progress if we started measuring how society's welfare was doing in terms of how people said their own lives were going, rather than looking at GDP, inflation, unemployment, and sort of guessing. If we're asking people how happy they are, then all of those surrounding facts of your life get integrated into what you say, and that's how we can better understand what's really important and how we're doing.
In your own work and your own organisation, you place a particular value on spreading happiness. Indeed, you think that giving money or help to other people is a particular cause of happiness for the donor.
Yeah, so that is important, although that's not quite what we focus on. So there is already a whole bunch of research indicating that altruism is good for us, but we focus on the other bit, which is how your altruism can have the biggest impact to others.
Right.
So when we give to charity, we often want to help and feel good, but we tend not to be as focused about the impact our charity has as we would if we're thinking about investing our money or buying a car. Are you getting value for money? So we're taking this sort of combination of ideas that we think we have a duty, an obligation, an opportunity to help other people. But when we do that, we should try and have the most impact that we can. Can you get more for your money, just like you would think about in any other walk of life? But the sort of novel thing we're doing is that we're trying to measure the effectiveness of charities in terms of their impact on people's happiness, which no one has ever done before.
Very interesting. So I have a little bit of money and I'm thinking I might give it to Ukraine, or I might give it to Pakistan flood relief. Yeah. And you would be able to help me to make that decision, would you?
I could, if you wanted.
Well, give me some examples of things you think are more effective and less effective.
So the thing that our recommendation for 2022, so I've been doing this a few years. I did a PhD in philosophy, and then I started this organisation because I thought this was a question worth answering. I've now got a small team, and the organisation that we recommend is called Strong Minds, which treats depression for women in Uganda and Zambia. You can, through group therapy, you can treat a case of depression for about just over £100. So these people are not only very poor, but they're also suffering tremendously. And that money can really go a long way. It can be life-changing, allow people to get back on their feet, take agency of their lives. So that's where we think probably your money goes furthest. On the Ukraine point...
Sorry, you've kind of scanned the globe and you think that of all the things we could put our money into, I'm not poo-pooing this, I'm just trying to clarify.
Yes.
You think that of all the things we could put our money into, the biggest result for the money we put in would be helping depression in these African countries amongst women.
So yeah, that's where we've got to. So we haven't rigorously evaluated absolutely everything in the world, but we start from... So one way in which we cheat is we start with the perspective that probably your money goes furthest abroad.
Yeah.
So rather than giving on your high street, I mean, lots of people think that charity begins at home, but I think we should be... that is important, but we should be interested in really getting there, having the greatest impact that we can. And so it's much harder to help people in developed countries. In low-income countries, your money can go a lot further. So one big comparison we did was looking at cash transfers to very poor families. So you might get $1,000, and these would be to families who are living on the kind of the global poverty line. And then we compare that to people who are very poor and depressed and treating them for depression. And we find that the latter is 10 times more cost effective than the former. And that surprises most people who think that if you're trying to help those who in very poor countries, then it's got to be poverty. That's got to be the story. But not everyone who's depressed is poor. Not everyone who's poor is depressed. And actually, we think it can be more impactful to focus on treating serious mental health illnesses. So that's the kind of we're sort of comparing in that space. It's I can talk to the Ukrainian point if you'd like.
Let me just broaden it out for a moment. We'll see how long we've got. Give us the advantage of your knowledge of philosophy and of history, and give us some kind of perspective about how other societies have looked at this over generations, over history.
Well, the idea that happiness, how we feel, how we experience our lives, should be important is, I mean, in the Western canon, it goes back to Aristotle and Epicurus. Christianity happens, it slightly goes away, it comes back in with Adam Smith and Jeremy Bentham and the Enlightenment thinkers, Benjamin Franklin. But I mean, there's sort of the idea that what matters is our subjective experience of life has never gone away. It's gone to come out of fashion. A difference now is that we can survey people in large numbers. So these general population surveys haven't been only started happening after the Second World War. So that's when you started to get enough data. And now you can do things like you can look at Twitter metadata and people, saying things which seem more positive or more negative. So it's kind of an old idea which we're rediscovering because there's more information. People are realizing that GDP and just general prosperity seems to have its limits. It doesn't really seem to be doing as much as we thought. We're concerned about the environment, and now that's kind of pushing us to focus more directly on a thing that we would always have taken seriously if we'd thought about it.
You and I are both here today with very cheerful faces, and I suspect we probably are both quite happy because we enjoy what we do. Is there much in that?
Yes. So work is an enormous part of life. The value of being employed is not just the money you earn, but also it's the what you get from your job. It's the social connection. It's the feeling of purpose. So to have a good job is one which has autonomy, mastery, and purpose. So autonomy, you get a freedom to do, scope to manage your own activities. You're not, managed on the clock every minute. Mastery, you get to get better at something. Purpose, you feel like what you're doing is meaningful. And if you have those things, then you'll probably have a good job.
But if you and I are lucky enough to be happy, it's also our duty to spread that happiness to others, which is why people should watch GB News, perhaps.
Well, perhaps, yes. I think we, of course, have an obligation to others, yeah. We should do the best with that.
Very, very interesting. That is Dr. Michael Plant. Coming up, Netflix is calling it a global event. Harry and Meghan's long-awaited docu-series airs this week. It's doubtful that the royal family will be watching. It says it is wearied by the Sussexes' constant attacks on them. What can we expect to see? That's after the break.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prisons?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. B, I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Welcome back. It's been a difficult week for the Crown. Attention was supposed to be focused on the Prince and Princess of Wales as they made their first trip abroad since the death of Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth. The Palace hoped that we would be talking about the winners of Prince William's major initiative, the Earthshot Prize. But instead, a senior member of the royal household resigned, accused of racism. And Netflix released a 1-minute trailer for the 6-part docuseries starring the Duke and Duchess of Sussex. GB News royal reporter Cameron Walker was in Boston with the Prince and Princess of Wales. Well, so much for the best laid plans.
Well, Michael, I think it's fair to say that Prince William and Princess Catherine's visit here to the United States has in part been overshadowed by two quite major royal scandals. The first involves the late Queen's former lady-in-waiting, Lady Susan Hussey, who was accused of asking a black domestic abuse campaigner where she really came from. Now, since then, Lady Hussey has stepped down from her honorary position. She has apologised for what the palace are describing as unacceptable comments. She has also offered to meet Ngozi Fulani, this campaigner, in person to apologise in person. So that's overshadowed day one of Prince William and Princess Catherine's visit here to Boston. Day two was overshadowed by Prince Harry and Meghan Markle's Netflix documentary trailer dropping. Clearly the timing very significant. It's pretty obvious that it was deliberately timed to overshadow Prince William and Princess Catherine's visit here to the United States, and it was all meant to be about Prince William's environmental Earthshot Prize, which is ironic really, because Prince Harry and Meghan in the past have claimed to really care about the environment, but they have taken the spotlight off the environment and actually put it on themselves. But as for Prince William and Princess Catherine, they very much have remained focused on their engagement here in Boston, and we're looking ahead to the Earthshot Prize, which has now happened, and it appears to be quite a big success, if I do say so. Actually, the people here in the United States was very interesting to see their reaction to Prince William and Princess Catherine. It was clear to see that there is huge support for the Prince and Princess of Wales here in the United States. People had queued for hours in the rain, hours in the cold. One lady I spoke to actually had travelled as far as Alaska to see William and Catherine just to catch a glimpse of them. So I think Prince William and Kate's popularity here is very strong.
Thank you very much, Cameron Walker, looking a little bit chilly in Boston, Massachusetts. Well, Tom Bauer is a journalist and he's also author of Revenge, Meghan, Harry and the War with the Windsors, and he joins me now. Welcome to the programme, Tom. Whose revenge against whom and why?
Well, clearly it's the revenge of the Sussexes against Charles and William and Kate, and to some extent even the Queen. They felt they hadn't been given the celebrity they sought, and have set up an alternative headquarters in California.
And so you think really the offence against the Sussexes that they feel themselves is that they were denied the celebrity they wanted. I mean, that's a pretty third-rate reason for revenge against the royal family, isn't it?
Well, that's the quality of the people you're talking about. I mean, Meghan clearly, in my view, never intended to stay in Britain for long. She saw the royal appointment becoming Duchess as a stepping stone to what she called her next chapter in her life. She would have stayed if she could have taken the star role, but she constantly felt frustrated that the Queen was the star and she was supporting cast. And I don't think she enjoyed living in Kensington Palace. After all, she only had 2 bedrooms, and across the corridor, Kate and William had a 22-room flat and 2 kitchens. It was just unequal for her, and she couldn't understand why Harry didn't have more money and wasn't in line for the throne in a way in which she could become the Queen. So she was disappointed, to say the least, and got out as fast as she could.
Tom, stick with me. We're going to look at this trailer, which I think lasts about a minute.
Why did you want to make this documentary?
No one sees what's happening behind closed doors. I had to do everything I could to protect my family.
When the stakes are this high, doesn't it make more sense to hear our story from us?
Tom, from reading your book, I was struck that this is really very serious, that this represents a big peril for the royal family, because in particular, the accusation against the royal family, which I think you in your book consider to be unjustified, that it is racist, is extraordinarily damaging in the United States and by extension in the Caribbean and, of course, throughout Africa. Let's face it, it's not a good look anywhere in the world. And that was the impression I got from your book, that you think really this is pretty serious stuff for the royal family.
I do, and I fear that the Netflix documentary and then obviously the book is going to cause even more damage. And it needs leadership. It needs leadership from King Charles, because at some stage he is going to have to draw a line and say the Sussexes have really gone too far in their bid for fame and fortune at the expense of the royal family. And I've repeatedly warned about this for months now. It's quite clear what they're doing. It's very skillful and damaging, colossally damaging. And what an amazing trailer that one Netflix is. It's just full of threats and poison and innuendo and direct attacks on the royal family.
Despite the fact that Meghan and Harry were in London, of course, at the time of the Queen's funeral, and went out and shook the hands of the crowd and so on, behaving in a way as though they were still part of the active membership of the royal family. But to your point, what do you think the King can do about it?
Well, I think that they tried reconciliation during the funeral, and clearly it failed because the Sussexes weren't prepared to apologise and prepared to stop their campaign. I think the first step, which I think will be very popular, will be to take away the Sussexes' titles as Sussex. Of course, Harry is born a prince and will remain a prince. I think the next thing is for King Charles to announce that he has no relationship whatsoever with the Sussexes, and they're no longer members of the royal family as far as he's concerned. we'll see what happens. But I think that's the only thing he can do. He can't anymore just bury his head in the sand.
You'll be aware that we're dealing here not just with the British or Commonwealth audience, we're dealing also with a global audience. I imagine that in the United States, the actions that you've just spoken about would be interpreted as victimisation.
Well, for some, clearly. I mean, there's no doubt that Meghan has got a large constituency in America, especially those who love her Californian psychobabble. And I think her recent Spotify series increased her popularity, talking about wellness and all the rest of this stuff. And undoubtedly, she is an attractive, intelligent, determined woman who appeals especially to the diverse community, and young people like her. But I think America is divided. Older people, not talking about my age, but people above 35, 40, are tired of the Sussexes. They think that they're petulant and pushy and constantly self-preening. So I think they're talking to a divided population in America and a divided audience. And I think that the reason they're successful at the moment is because they're speaking on their own terms, on their own platform, and into a vacuum, the vacuum being that King Charles in London doesn't say anything.
Tom, there will be courtiers, you know this very well in the palace, who will pick up on the point that you've just made and say, look, people will lose patience. You can't go on forever, Harry, talking about, what happened to you 2 or 3 years ago. Eventually this will fizzle out. It would be a misstep to take their titles away, which will simply get them more supporters. How do you answer that?
Well, I think they're wrong, because I think that the idea that it'll fizzle out is just hope. And there's absolutely no experience, or there's no proof of that happening, because the Sussexes have a vested interest in keeping it going and looking for new and other allegations they can make, regardless of whether they're true or not. And if you're attacked, there's no use to all the time saying, well, we'll step back and withdraw and might even look like surrender. The point is that Kate and William are terrific ambassadors. They're very, very much admired, not only here, but clearly in America as well. And when William said soon after the Oprah Winfrey interview, we're not racists, that echoed across the world. And they just need to step up and say that louder now.
Tom Bower, author of that very interesting, very readable book, Revenge. Thank you very much for coming on GB News. Coming up, my association with London taxis goes back quite a few years. I'll tell you exactly how we're linked after the news with Bethany.
Michael, thank you. Good morning. It's 11:30. I'm Bethany Elsey in the GB newsroom. Military personnel could stand in for Border Force and emergency services staff during strikes over the Christmas period. It's part of contingency plans announced by the government. Around 2,000 members of the armed forces are now being trained alongside civil servants and volunteers to help limit disruption. The head of the police watchdog has been forced to resign over an historical allegation. It's emerged Michael Lockwood, who's been the Director General of the Independent Office for Police Conduct since 2018, is facing a criminal investigation. The Home Secretary, Suella Braverman, says she told him to quit or face immediate suspension after learning about the probe. The chair of the National Care Association has condemned Matt Hancock's account of how he managed care homes during the COVID pandemic as a deluded version of events. In his new book, the former health secretary says the virus was mainly brought into facilities by infected staff. But in the early stages of the outbreak, COVID patients were discharged from hospitals into care homes without prior testing. And England will face Senegal tonight for their first match in the knockout stage of the World Cup. The Africa Cup of Nations holders were runners-up in Group A, but the Three Lions remain unbeaten and are favourites to go into the next round. England supporters in Qatar are optimistic.
Feeling hopeful.
I'm very hopeful.
Score prediction?
3-1 England.
Okay. How are you feeling about tonight, guys?
Incredibly nervous. We know it's going to be a tough game. It's never easy at this stage. The group stages are out the way. Anything can happen. Senegal have got a great team, and it's going to be a tough one.
Prediction?
3-1 England.
It's way too optimistic. I'm going to go 2-1, maybe after extra time, but then I'll be in tears, so let's not go that far.
All right, great.
And hopefully no penalties.
You're up to date on TV, online and DAB+ radio. This is GB News. Now, let's get back to Michael.
Thank you, Bethany. Earlier in the programme, we talked about the problem of air pollution and the Great Smog of 1952. Vehicle emissions contribute, and so electric buses and taxis can help. Surprisingly, the electric taxi isn't new. Come with me, and I'll explain. I once had a professional association with the London cab. I was the Minister for Taxis, and in 1989, I decreed that by the year 2000, all London taxis should be accessible to wheelchairs. I think London was the first city in the world to have that requirement. And ever since then, I don't know, I've just kept an eye open for the London cab. Hello. Nowhere in particular, please.
OK.
Off you go. In these lovely electric taxis known as LEVCs, you have the sound of silence. When they first came in, I was very excited, you know, emission-free vehicle and so on. But to my amazement, I discover that 125 years ago, there was the London Electrical Cab Company, which ran electric taxis. Unfortunately, they weren't a great success at the time, but my goodness, the anniversary is worth celebrating. So I'm Michael, what's your name?
Hello, Michael, my name's Ian. Lovely to meet you.
Very nice to meet you. Have you been driving taxis for long?
I've just passed my 10-year anniversary, actually. It was November 2012 when I got my green badge, so yeah, just over 10 years.
Nothing but anniversaries today, 125 years of electric cabs and 10 years of Ian. What made you want to drive, Ian?
Lots of things, really. I'm from West Yorkshire originally. I'd always wanted to live in London. I moved down here in 2005, 2006. And I did a series of, you know, office jobs, bar work, that sort of thing. I'm also a musician and do bits of freelance writing. So I was looking for something that I could fit in around that. And I kept, you know, seeing London cabs, and I'd always loved them. And I thought I could do that. And I thought, no, that's for proper London cabbies.
Sorry, why did you love them?
Just because I'd always loved everything London, really, and they're just such an icon of London, aren't they?
Doing the knowledge as a cabbie, that is a big undertaking. It's not for wimps, is it?
It certainly isn't, no. It took me 4 years. I was working full-time while I was doing it. Some people do it quicker. So you have to learn thousands and thousands, I mean potentially endless numbers, of what we call points of interest. The examiner will ask you to tell him where 2 points of interest are, first of all. So he might say, well, Buckingham Palace, and you'd say, that's in the Mall. Actually, I think the proper address is Constitution Hill. But anyway, then he'd give you another one, and you'd tell him where that was, and then you'd have to recite the most direct route.
That is extraordinarily difficult to recite it, to have it in your mind.
It is. I was quite shocked when I realised that was how it went. I assumed it would be based on, you know, you'd be out on the street actually doing dummy taxi runs, although of course that would be very impractical to test people that way. So yeah, you have to remember absolutely everything.
Shall I tell you a story, Ian?
Please do.
When I was the Minister for Taxis, there was worry that some of the minicabs might not be safe for passengers, so there was an idea that they should be licensed, which I was pursuing. But the taxi drivers didn't like this idea because they thought it would give minicabs more respectability and make them more competition. So one day I was in 10 Downing Street, minding my own business, as it were. I was crossing, you know, the main hallway, and suddenly the Prime Minister, Margaret Thatcher, rushed out like a trapdoor spider. And her constituency was Finchley, and she had a lot of taxi drivers who were her constituents. And she came out to me and she said, I understand from my taxi drivers that you're thinking of licensing minicabs. And I said, yes, Prime Minister, you know there's a concern. And I had my hand on the banister. I was just going up the stairs, and her hand came down on top of mine like that. She pinned me to the banister and she said, stop it. And that was the end of that policy. What do you think of that, Ian?
I have to say I'm quite impressed, Michael. Yeah, that's pretty good.
It shows the power of your local constituency, doesn't
Indeed.
it? The taxi drivers ruled in Finchley in those days. Ian, we're talking about 125 years of electric taxis.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think of this one?
It's absolutely lovely. They've done such a good job with it. It's the first taxi, as far as I'm aware, that the London Taxi Company, or LEVC as they're known now, have ever built that is a pleasure to sit in all day and to drive. But famously, the old Fairway that I was talking about loving, that was really uncomfortable to drive. You were very cramped up and it was really hot. There's no aircon or anything like that. These cabs, for the driver, are so comfortable. They're so smooth to drive. Absolutely lovely. I don't know anyone who drives one of these who doesn't love it. And of course, it's lovely in the back as well. My favourite feature, everyone's favourite feature, I think, is the panoramic observation dome that you've got above you there, which lets so much light in during the day, and it's great at night for looking up at the city lights.
Oh, it's just wonderful because to appreciate London, you have to be able to look towards the tops of buildings. And who have you had in the back of your cab?
I've had loads of people. I've got Michael Portillo for a start. Who else have I had celebrity-wise? I once picked up Peter Stringfellow and his wife and their newborn baby outside Mothercare in Oxford Street, took them home. I thought that was such a touching domestic scene to be involved with Peter Stringfellow of all people. I kind of felt like I've really arrived as a taxi driver having done something like that.
Okay.
I've had Pete Doherty from the famously outrageous rock star.
How much longer will you do it, Ian?
I'm not sure. I'm glad that I've done 10 years. As I get older, I find it more tiring than I used to. Because of the other work that I do, music and writing, that sort of comes and goes. If I had more of that work, I would obviously drive the cab less. If I had less, I would drive the cab more. But it's nice to think that so long as I've got a cab and I'm in London, I would keep it. I'd like to think even if by some miracle I ended up on top of the pops next week and selling millions of albums, I'd probably keep my licence on and just take the cab out every now and then just for fun.
Why don't we give you a plug now, Ian? Why don't you sing me something as we go around this square? Go on then.
Oh, I walked right into that, didn't I?
Yeah, go on.
Well, I wrote a song called Over the Westway, which is about my favourite flyover, the Westway, the A40. And we actually filmed a music video for that in my cab with me singing in the front and various shots of the band in the back. So I suppose I could give you the opening bells of that, couldn't I? That would be appropriate.
Go on.
Sunset in April on the Westway, up in a sky of pink and blue and grey, with you so small and far below me. That do.
That's brilliant. Your ode to your favourite flyover, the Westway. Brilliant stuff, Ian.
This is like being you in one of your programmes now.
It's parody beyond even being me. Thanks to Ian Beetlestone, and as you can see, I really enjoyed that trip. Coming up, Cornwall is known for its wonderful beaches and its fantastic food. The Padstow Christmas Festival celebrates the region's finest produce. We'll be there after the break.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
Why not take us home with you by visiting the GB News shop at gbnews.store? You'll find all the official merchandise, a really good present actually for yourself, your friends or your family.
We ship across the UK mainland at no extra cost. GB News, the People's Channel.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
The guy went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions. I have no time for cultural totalitarianism. We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Welcome back. If you're watching in the West Country, you might be able to smell good food on the wind. The Padstow Christmas Festival started back in 2008 and has returned after a 2-year break due to the pandemic. Celebrating the best food, drink and produce that the region has to offer, the festival is championed by local chefs Paul Ainsworth, Rick Stein and Nathan Outlaw. Our South West England reporter, Jeff Moody, is at the festival, which is, I believe, a celebration of Cornish food, drink and produce. Are you enjoying yourself, Jeff?
I'm having a lovely time, Michael, and you're right, you can actually smell the good food on the wind. Now, you associate Cornwall, don't you, food-wise, with two things. Firstly, over there, fish and chips, and of course, Cornish pasties, and one more, of course, cream teas. But there's much, much more to Cornish cuisine than just that. Cornish cuisine has been developing and moving forward over the last few years, to the point that we're now getting celebrity chefs that are setting up down here and really putting Cornwall on the map when it comes to food. Let's talk to the organiser of the Padstow Christmas market, Tina. Tina, thank you for inviting us down. Let's just quickly sort out, while we're talking about Cornish food, let's sort out the cream tea debate. Jam first or cream first?
It has to be jam first for me, I'm afraid.
Jam first. Well, you see, I live in Devon, so I do it the other way round, I'm afraid. But never mind, we'll do jam first now we're here. This has been going since 2008, hasn't it? What gave you the idea to do this?
Well, 2008 was a very poor year for everybody, as I'm sure people remember, and a group of us got together and thought, what can we do to actually encourage people to come to Padstow at a time when it would normally be quiet? So we thought, well, yeah, Christmas festival, we'll go with that, and when would be good to have it? Well, first weekend in December. So the festival was born, and we've gone from strength to strength since then.
But you took a decision to focus primarily on the food and drink, didn't you? What made you decide to go down that route?
Well, I have to say, we were very lucky to have Rick Stein in Padstow, and he's very passionate about Padstow. And after discussions with him, we thought, well, he's got the reputation. We can use him to be involved, to demo dishes and other chefs. So we started to build on the fact that Padstow's become quite a foodie destination over the years, and build on that. And then now we're very lucky with the fact that Cornwall produces the most amazing produce in the county, and world-class produce, as the chefs will tell you. So of course then the Christmas market was born, and we decided to showcase what Cornwall does as well, or if not better than anyone else in the country.
Brilliant. Thank you very much indeed, Tina. Well, I'm going to have a wander around and see what I can find to eat and drink. But for now, thank you very much indeed. 30% of the people that come here are from Cornwall, but the rest of them, the other 70%, come from outside the county, outside the duchy. So people are coming from far and wide in order to sample the best of Cornish cuisine. Over there, you've got the Chef's Theatre, where the chefs are performing demonstrations of food, but I'm not going to have anything to eat quite yet. I'm going to have something to drink instead. Ed, your job interests me enormously. If it doesn't work out for me as a television journalist, I think I might have your job. You're a beer sommelier.
That is my job. I get to eat and drink for a living, responsibly, of course. No, I've got the best job in the world. It's wonderful.
So I notice you've got some beer here for me to try, but we're having it in champagne flutes rather than pint glasses. Why is that?
Absolutely. Well, we've respected wine. Wine and food has been the done thing for hundreds and hundreds of years. I've realised that we haven't taught people about beer. Like, beer's 9,000 years old, and we put wine and champagne on a pedestal, spirits on a pedestal, and we look at beer as a consumable. So if you pop it in a champagne flute, but there's also a reason for this, because this is our lager, but this is a lager with a difference. This has won the world's best champagne beer twice now. This is Camel Valley Pilsner. So we have a Pilsner called Offshore, which is our lager, and our friends over down the river at Camel Valley Vineyard, they reseed it with their champagne yeast, so it goes through a double fermentation, becomes sort of bone dry. Lovely, lovely flavours on this one. Give it a go.
I will give it a go, yeah. I mean, cheers.
Cheers.
Do you clink glasses with beer?
With beer, of course we do. Absolutely.
Of course, years ago, hops were grown in abundance in Britain. Kent in particular and Herefordshire were massive hop gardens. When everyone from the east of London used to come down for the hop picking. We don't do that anymore, do we? We import our hops. Does that mean that the quality of the beer isn't as good as it used to be?
Far from it. I suppose it's like grape varieties. We're still growing hops in Kent and Hereford. So traditional British hops like Fuggles and Northern Brewer, for our sort of wonderful British cask ales, they're really subdued flavours, sort of spicy, earthy flavours. But you've got then the German hops and the Czech hops, so Saaz, and then in the Hallertau region of Germany, which is the biggest hop growing sort of area in the world. But now we've got New World hops from America that have got big zingy sort of citrus flavours, passion fruit flavours, but with that is a new sort of bitterness as well. So a lot of the New World IPAs, as it were.
Lovely. Now you match you match the beers to food. What sort of food would you recommend I have with this?
Well, this one, as we're starting our dining. Glass of champagne, what better, as we're in Padstow as well, than some local oysters? How are you with oysters?
I don't think I've ever had an oyster. Should we try an oyster? Shall we? Come on, let's try an oyster. Not the sort of oysters that you sort of have to slip down your throat.
Well, we might do it a couple ways for you. So there's natural oysters.
Right.
We'll see if Dave and Paul might be able to do oysters in a couple of different ways for you.
Right. I've only got a couple of minutes left, so I just need a very quick oyster just to try. I don't need an oyster, but I'll have an oyster. Is this the deep fried one?
This is a raw one, so you can see what the raw one looks like.
I'm not eating that.
You're not going to eat that one, are you?
No, but I'll try a deep fried one.
No worries at all. Deep fry coming up for you now.
And I want to quickly talk to John as well, who's our celebrity chef for the afternoon. So let's. Have we got an oyster ready? Oh, there we go. Lovely.
Nice bit of dry seaweed on top.
Bit of seaweed on it. Good.
Bit of sea salt, and there's some tartar
Lovely.
Sauce there.
Great. What do I do? Just eat it straight down.
Yep.
One.
Scoop up the tartar. And just
Right. Oh gosh. I'll put that down. Straight back. Oh, there you go. Well, thank you very much. Oh, it's really hot. Right. I want to talk to you. Oh, this is really hot. Oh dear. Hello.
How are you? You okay?
I'm all right. It's really, really hot.
Yeah.
Tell me, Paul. Tell me about why people come to Cornwall for food.
What I mean, it starts with the produce and the people that. You know, the fishermen, the farmers, the producers, the artisan, craftspeople that just now are doing such a phenomenal job. So then you've got these incredible raw materials, which then gives the restaurants, the hotels, the pubs, the cafes, the wine bars, all of the kind of food and drink eateries in Cornwall, the most amazing produce, and we have it all from you know, like the breweries to, like I say, the farms, the fishing, everything. So it's become this kind of food mecca. It's incredible.
But if it wasn't for chefs like you, Michelin star chefs that come down and choose to practice here, choose to work here, then all that local produce would go to waste, wouldn't it? It would just go to the supermarket.
Well, you've got so let's take Johnny, who Flying Fish, where we get all of our seafood from. You know, Johnny sort of supplies pretty much every Michelin star restaurant in the country. So what you find is you've got not just Michelin star restaurants, great pubs, restaurants, cafes, all wanting Cornish produce, which is amazing because then that supports the fishermen. Because even if you didn't have the likes of us down here, there's still not enough people to kind of buy it all. So, but what does happen? You've just got Cornish produce right across the British Isles, which is amazing.
Amazing indeed, and plenty more food and drink for me to try. But for now, John Ainsworth, thank you very much indeed.
Very much. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you too. Right, I'm going to go and try and find something that isn't quite so hot. Yes, Michael.
I was just going to say congratulations to you on having your debut oyster on camera. That was very brave. Tell me this. Cornwall used to suffer enormously from being at the end of long lines of communication. It could be cut off just by its railway line being overwhelmed by the sea. Has its fame now for food meant that it feels less cut off from the rest of the world? It's become really quite a centre for foodism, hasn't it?
Yes, absolutely, and you're right. I mean, there's no motorway that goes through Cornwall. It's very difficult for people to get here, as anyone that's come down here knows. You spend hours on the A30 just stuck in traffic. But yes, it's a destination, and I think the great thing is that it's not just during the season. You know, people come down here in the summer for the beaches, for the sunshine, for the resorts, but then all year round, people now come here for the food. And a lot of the restaurants and the bars and the pubs are deliberately targeting the foodies for the rest of the year. So it's a good thing all round.
Thank you, Jeff. Enjoy what's in your right hand. Alistair Stewart is here. Alistair, both my parents died suffering from dementia. And it's a subject you're going to be talking about today, isn't it?
Yes, it's an interesting one, I think, and I heard your conversations earlier on about whether the NHS is crumbling and failing. There was a new drug called lecanemab, which was trialled and shown to be effective, and indeed the Americans are adopting it, we think, probably in the early spring. So there were lots of hurrahs in the community of people who either live with Alzheimer, dementia sufferers, or those who work in that area, Alzheimer's Society and the rest of it. But then the officialdom within the NHS and the medical groups said, I'm not sure that we can afford this, and I'm not quite sure that the NHS, as it's currently structured, is up to administering it and testing who would benefit from it. So we're going to have a little look at how the brilliant boffins may just be slightly out of kilter with the people who are actually running our health service.
Extraordinarily interesting. Alistair Stewart is next. That's it from me. Thank you so much for watching. See you next week.
Looking ahead to today's weather, and the UK is looking fairly grey for many with a chilly easterly breeze. Let's take a look at the details. Areas in the far southwest of England may see the odd brighter spell, but the cloud will make it a grey day for most. Showers will also reach southern coasts of Cornwall. Like much of the UK, southeast England will experience a keen breeze through today. This will make it feel closer to 2 degrees Celsius. A little light rain is possible for southern Wales, and this may include a small amount of sleet over higher ground. Central areas of England will tend to stay drier, but there'll still be a large amount of cloud around, making it a rather dull second half of the weekend for many. It's eastern coasts that'll see the most frequent showers, the occasional one of which may be heavy. They'll feed inland on the brisk breeze, so it's worth holding on to an umbrella. The showers and cloud will push into eastern Scotland, however the northwest of Scotland will likely see the brightest skies across the UK today with some sunny spells. Western counties of Northern Ireland are also in with a chance of seeing some sunshine today, but eastern coasts will be affected by scattered showers from the Irish Sea. We'll retain a very similar setup through this afternoon and evening with further showers in the east, and that's how the weather's shaping up for the rest of today.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations. For for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio,